Hello and welcome back to week 6. We're going to wrap up topic 5 on the late 1800s and the ideologies that are forming and changing policies throughout the world during this time. Last couple of weeks we've been looking at different types of imperialism, liberal imperialism, imperial partnerships, things like that, and how do they affect trade and relationships and policies, and how the world and the countries in the world relate to one another. That's what we've been looking at. And I want to give you some real world example this week to see how this sort of all plays out. What is the end game? Where is it moving us as we move from the very latter part of the 1890s, moving into the new century, moving into the 1900s? Where are we going to look to see where all of this sort of comes together? We're going to look at China, the grand prize, that last bastion of land and resource and money and people and markets and all that. We're going to look at that and how does that work. But let's take a quick look at where we've come so far. So without further ado, let's jump in. Imperialism in the 19th century, we've looked at this as a kind of how people are grabbing at things, trying to find their way to make their nation the strongest, survival of the fittest. We have a lot of ideologies that are playing into the role of this. We looked at Africa as one of the key points of, somebody coming along with a pie cutter and just cutting up Africa into little pieces. And of course, Africans are not getting anything. It's the people outside of Africa who are the beneficiaries. King Leopold from Belgium, who's taking that center, almost teal blue Congo region and enslaving the people and pulling out as much resources as he possibly can. South Africa, the French West Africa. These are all peoples, Europeans primarily, who've come in and taken and grabbed land, grabbed these resources and are trying to make use of it. And we saw this sort of recurring rise in this kind of imperialism, this new imperialism, right around the 1870s, 1880s, and it's kind of like wrapping up, coming to a head by the end of the 1890s. What's going on in Southeast Asia? We got a map here that kind of gives you an idea. Those little regions are pretty much totally dominated by European interests. Most of the islands on the southern side, those are all controlled by the Dutch. Britain has hit its little hands in everything. You can see the dark green on what would be called modern day Vietnam or Cambodia in the lower area. That's all controlled by French imperialism. And you kind of look at this and go, well, what's really left? Well, we had the Spanish-American War, and as a result of that, we end up with the United States pretty much gaining control of the Philippines. It wasn't something that they really wanted to do. It was more of a matter of coming alongside and being the hero, that liberal imperialism that we talked about. Let's go help the underdog. Let's help them rise up against that oppressive Spanish people that were oppressing the Philippines. They took it over, and now the war's finished, and the question is, what does America do with it? It's not like they really want to occupy it. That's not liberal. They wanted to sort of rescue. Well, what do? Do they kind of let the Philippines sort of govern themselves, and now they have self-rule like we did in Australia or Canada? Well, with all of those little money-hungry, little grabby Europeans, the French, the Spanish, the Germans, the British, they're all kind of, circling like vultures over a kill, waiting to see what's happening with the Philippines. America decides, I think the best thing to do is just kind of be there as a presence and help them. Well, that's kind of like defeating the purpose of getting rid of the oppressors and letting them have their own the liberal way of governing themselves. But it's sort of like the lesser of two evils kind of thing. But if you notice that very top part, that northern part, that little China part right there, this is still this massive region that is controlled by the Qing dynasty, the Manchu court. And so the question comes in is what are we going to do with China? Are we just going to leave it? China at this current time in the late 1890s or so, latter part of the 1880s, it's having a lot of unrest. But it is the prize, it is the jewel, it's the last thing, last bastion of land that people could grab. So the world's eyes turn to China and they figure out, well, what are we going to do with China? Well, what are some of the key interests? Well, in the south you had the Canton region. That was heavy port, lots of business, a lot of commercial. You had the Yangtze River Valley and Shanghai. That was another one. That's that next bubble up. The Yellow River was another one that was more northern, coming into that Gulf, that bay right there on the Yellow Sea. You had Peking, or at the time it was Beijing, but English people couldn't pronounce that, so they ended up turning it into Peking. That was like the capital. That was the headquarters. That's where the palace was. That's where the officials were. But there's a river that comes right off of that and runs right into that Yellow Sea region. Very important. Up in the northern area, that little rectangle area, right above what is today Korea, that Manchurian region was rich in coal. Now, what is coal for? Well, it's good to go over and all that industry that we want to put in, the steam engines, the factories, the manufacturing, the steamships, the warships, all those ran off of coal. So that was a big region of interest as well. The problem is that China at this time had some serious conflict, internal conflicts. They had rebels and rebellions that were popping up. In 1875, the old emperor dies, and this gentleman, his name is Emperor Guangxi, he takes over, but he's very young. So his auntie sort of runs the country. She's the regent. That's the Dowager Empress. She is really the one who wears the pants, so to speak. She's the force and power. But she's not emperor, or she's not empress. She's just Dowager Empress. And what happens during this time is she really wants the power. She doesn't want Guangxi to have Guangxu to have it. He really is actually in power. He's really doing the job from about 1889 to about 1898. But in 1898 or 1894, 1895, you had the first Sino-Japanese War. Sino is the Chinese, is where we get our idea of Chinese. They end up in a war and they lose. China loses. So the Empress decides she's going to create this big coup, throw out the emperor, put him into basically house arrest and not let him leave, and she assumes the throne and all of the power for real. And that's what happens there. These are two different depictions. One's a photograph, the other one's a painting. You can see Japan has all this artillery, they've been modernized, and China really can't fight back. They don't have that. Remember, China kind of went into that, we're going to keep things to ourselves mode. Japan went, we're going to modernize, et cetera, et cetera. So very, very unbalanced, even though China had many more people than did Japan. As a result of the loss of the war, the emperor wants to do some major reforms. This is called the 100 Days Reform. But in this time to build up, strengthen up China, that's when the coup takes place, and that's when Dowager Empress steps in and throws him out, imprisons him basically. So he's gone in September of 1898. So you still have all these powers. Japan is now moving into the Manchurian area. They've pretty much taken over most of Korea. It's sort of a protectorate of Japan by now. They're looking to move into those coal regions. They want to get down towards Peking and have access to that bay that's there. And so you kind of wonder, well, what do you do now? What happens now? Is the rest of the world just going to let Japan kind of go in and take it all? Or are they going to come up with some scheme? Well, you see that area in the circle, the red circle there? That is the area of interest. That, for the next several years, is going to become the primary focus of the world, right there in China. And that's pretty much where we're going to go to in our next video when we look at China as the grand prize.